Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ash here, coming at you today in Clash Royale with a very special guest. His name is EsoPa. He's a Clash Royale streamer and a really intelligent guy. And today we're going to have a pretty long conversation and we're going to go into the mental aspects of Clash Royale, what you should be thinking about and when you should be thinking about them during the course of a match. So he's going to provide us all sorts of next level tips, and in the meanwhile, in the background, I'll have highlights from top players in a recent Bren Chong CWA tournament. Follow me on Twitter if you want to join those tournaments every day at 5 p.m. Eastern. So guys, without further ado, I bring you EsoPa. Alright guys, I am so excited today to be joined by none other than EsoPa. He's a streamer, a content creator, and more importantly, he's really truly like a brilliant mind when it comes to Clash Royale and strategy and next level game mechanics. EsoPa, what's going on, man?
You keep flattering me, man.
Well, I think everybody would agree, though. Anybody who's watched your streams are like, wow, the amount of knowledge you put out there is almost so much that it's tough to digest. So I wanted to invite you on today to really go next level and talk about how to gain a mental edge, and almost just as importantly, to talk about how to recover from a loss and how to recover as a better player. So let's hop right into it. So the first thing I really want to talk about is, what do you do after a loss? Do you advocate watching a replay? And if so, what should players be paying attention to specifically after a loss? And is it just as important to watch a win replay, or how does that all come together for a player?
I am definitely an advocate for watching replays. The amount of knowledge that you can get back from a loss is far more than whatever knowledge you can glean from wins, like any time of the day. The most important part that I really want to stress here about replays is that, like, no one really cares about your losses. I know that when you take a look at this loss and it has like some lingering feeling to you, that you just can't watch it because, oh, I hate this card, or oh, like, he shouldn't have won because of card levels. It like does not matter. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, Clash Royale is a 1v1 game, and in 1v1 games, there's no other variable that you can control other than your own play and your own self. And replays are the perfect vehicle for making sure that you can really control what every game, like what you get out of every game, instead of just playing without thinking about anything and just stagnating. You don't want to do that to yourself.
Yeah. So
yeah, you don't want to delude yourself in any way.
Yeah, and that's great advice too, because there is like some sort of a mental, emotional attachment to the game, and the inclination is to make an excuse, just kind of like you said. So, okay, so walk me through this, EsoPa. I just lost. I'm frustrated. I'm kind of mad about it, right? So I'm watching my replay. The tendency is just to kind of, fast forward through the replay, and you still have that emotional kind of attachment to the match, and, like, you look for that one mistake that sometimes you made after you made it, but, what is a better way to analyze and watch a replay after a loss?
Well, the first thing is, I commend you on actually watching your replay, your loss.
Thanks.
That's like
There's
always
plenty
the
of
first
them,
step.
EsoPa. There's plenty of them.
Yeah, it's not, you don't particularly look for that one, it's like kind of a myth that, oh, this one action right here, like, always lost me the game. It's usually, if anything, a series of events that leads up to it. Mm-hmm. It's not important that you are able to identify exactly what went wrong in a game. It's important to do the action and then to glean whatever you can. Getting more knowledge out of a replay really does come down to things like asking your friends, asking your clanmates, watching streams, watching other videos, learning about it as much that way. Mm-hmm. And then slowly you'll be able to extract what you need from a replay. Like, I don't expect anybody to fully understand what they're even looking at, or to really understand everything that's going on.
Yeah, like, so, like, you're not necessarily looking for one mistake, but rather, you know, for me, for example, I know that sometimes one of my big deficits is that I play too aggressively. So, I mean, it's hard to kind of get a grasp on when I'm playing too aggressively. So are there any tips to kind of, you know, I don't know, analyze my own play style in terms of a broad spectrum of my mentality in the match, aside from just the specific mistakes?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, when you understand something about your play, like, oh yeah, I played too aggressively, isolating that one thing is perfect. That's how you should be looking to improve. Like, you don't improve, like, if you ask a player, like, I want a list from you of just things that you want to improve at, and they give you a huge list. The way I would tell them to improve slowly, you would pick one thing and then do it until you master it, or do it until you no longer are uncomfortable with it. So for you, if you say that aggressiveness is really popping up in your playstyle too much, every replay, every loss, I would just tell you to look at your aggressive plays. Ask yourself, like, was that worth it? Why did I do it? Justify your play. If you can't justify it, don't ever do it. And then when you're in that situation again, you just have to ask yourself, like, what am I doing now?
Yeah.
And that's like the beauty of really dissecting yourself and finding the best way for yourself to improve. And, like, you know, the game gives you tools for that. You just have to do it yourself. And that's goes hand in hand with, like, you know, your thought process and your mindsets that you should be having if you want to really get to the top.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I struggle with, honestly, is that, so I'm an over-aggressive player, but there's sometimes that calls for being super aggressive. So I think there's some times where I'm always in my own head where I'm like, okay, hold back, and then I miss opportunities because I'm being too passive, because I'm thinking too much about not being super aggressive. So if that makes any sense, like, I'm in like a weird conundrum, it seems like sometimes. Is there any way to, like, well, I guess a lot of that is paying attention to how much elixir my opponent has, and then I can kind of, you know, train myself to know when to capitalize on their elixir deficit or my elixir advantage and when not to. Is there any other tips that you know, can kind of get me through, like, that kind of conundrum?
Yeah, you definitely sound like you're in your head a lot.
Yes.
The best way I found to really push a player's playstyle is to go to both extremes. If I take a new deck, you'll see me lose a lot with it in the beginning because I will test every frontier with the deck. I'll try my best to win off of the craziest pushes. And then at the same time, I'm also trying to play in a way that I don't take any damage. And then you find that middle ground, and you'll be able to know the extent, like, you need to find that boundary for yourself. Like, how far can I take this deck? How far can my opponent take this deck? And then you make these decisions based upon, like, what you know. And that takes learning, that takes experience, that takes wisdom over time to, like, really get. It's like, I can't really expect someone to know every interaction in the game when they're just starting out. It just doesn't really work like that.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And also, so, you know, you touched upon when you play a new deck. So is there any, you know, specific tips that you can give to people when they pick up a brand new deck? Like, should they be playing more defensively oriented than they normally would to try to get a feel and try to mitigate the, you know, the big pushes that they're going to kind of, you know, be susceptible to? Or should they just kind of use their normal play style?
When it comes to new decks, there's definitely it's like I really wouldn't recommend. I really wouldn't recommend someone playing a completely new deck, like a completely new archetype, because if your goal is to become better, you don't want to sidetrack yourself. I say it on my stream sometimes, but you would rather be a master at one deck than be like semi okay with 100.
Okay.
Yeah, but if you do really want to pick up a new deck and you do it a lot, consistency will come into play, like whether or not you can play that deck. But if I were to approach it, I would do what I do before, and I would test both spectrums of the deck. Playing too safe, you lose opportunities. Playing too aggressive, you will lose without knowing why you lost, and both outcomes are not good for you.
Yeah, so that's actually good advice there, because my inclination would be to be more defensive with a new deck, more cautious. But you're right. I mean, if you're playing differently than you're supposed to, then that's probably a bad thing at the end of the day. But kind of moving on here, like aside from the replays and the new decks, let's talk about where your mind should be mentally inside a live match. So besides thinking about your own cards, what should you be thinking about? Like, what's the mental process throughout a normal match?
Well, I don't think that... okay. I'm going to try and answer this as best as possible.
I'm with you.
So yeah, you have... I believe there are like 5 main things that you should be taking a look at, like inside the game.
Yeah.
Other than like your cards. I want whoever's like watching the video right now to imagine the board. Mm-hmm. You have the Clash Royale board. You have your King Tower, Crown Tower. You have your Elixir bar. You have your cards. When you as a player are looking at this, I don't want you to be looking at your cards. If you have a deck that you've been playing all this time and you know it inside and out, that's the first prerequisite for actually getting to play this game.
Okay, wait, let me stop you right there. So, in your mind, how many matches would you say it takes for somebody, or an average person, to know a deck inside and out? Like, you're talking like 10 matches? You're talking like 100 matches?
I'm talking in the hundreds.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think that you play like dozens of games and then you'll be able to know your deck.
Gotcha. Okay, go on.
Yeah.
So
you really need to dig into the minutiae of the deck. Okay. But let's say you're I want to take the example of like League of Legends, because like that was a game I put a lot of my time into. Mm-hmm. If anybody who has played League of Legends, they would know that top players, like when they're looking at the board, when they're looking at the map, their eyes are not on their champions. Their eyes are on the enemy laning champions, because they know inside and out everything about their champion. Their champion becomes like an extension of themselves, and then they're able to influence the map through that. You can bring that same logic here. Like when I'm playing, I don't look at my cards. The only time I ever look at my cards is when I glance down to see the next card in my cycle, to know what I'm going to be doing, like my decisions that I make.
Okay.
So, yeah, like...
So what are you thinking about?
So I'm thinking...
or what are you looking at, I should say.
Yeah. So what I'm actually looking at, like my eyes are on the opponent's King Tower and my opponent's board. I'm looking at my opponent's side of the field, not mine. The only time I ever really look at mine is when I know that he's going to do something on my side that I need to be ready for. So, yeah, your eyes have to be at the right place. And then the entire time, I think the top 5 things that should be going through your head are in no particular order. Like, you should be taking care of the time. Mm-hmm. So, obviously, this changes within, tourney standard, ladder ends faster, tourney standard lasts longer. You should be taking in moment, like your opponent's cycle. Opponent's cycle, like what can he do the entire time when your game is going on. Because like, I didn't mention this, but because your mind is not thinking about your deck, your mind can also keep track of your opponent's deck. That's really important.
Yeah, that's something that I struggle with personally, is that like, what I tend to do is not to interrupt you, but what I tend to do is that like I play my deck, I know what my opponent's counter is for my win conditions. So for example, if I'm playing like a hog deck, I know they have cannon, and that's really that's really consciously the only thing I'm really thinking about, rather than their entire cycle. You know, maybe I'll pay attention to their win condition as well, but I have a tough time really focusing on every single card in their deck. Sometimes it's too late before I get a feel for that. So are you saying that I should be immediately trying to ascertain every single card in my opponent's deck?
It's difficult, but you have to push yourself.
Okay.
I think that's like the biggest advice I can give people if they really want to step their game up to the next level. Every time I'm playing within a game, I will, if you watch my stream, and I'm trying to tell you guys what I'm thinking, in my head, I go through a list of cards that he plays. My actions are made so that I can draw out his cards, and then I can figure out his cycle. Say, I put Princess down. He logs it. Okay, now I know he has log. Say I'm playing like a Zapate, for example. I play mine. He drops Mega Minion. So now I have Mega Minion log in my head. And because eventually when the cycle goes through, I'll be able to know where he's at. And because Clash Royale is a fixed rotation, you can keep track of every 4 cards. And then you know that every time he plays 4 cards, he's back at the last part that he just played. And you, if you can do that, then you can do things like elixir counting. You can do things, and when you can do elixir counting, it opens up doors for you to making smart decisions, and you can justify your decisions, and this is where it all comes kind of interrelated.
Yeah. I mean, that's great advice. And so far of your 5 most important factors in a match, we've discussed time, opponent cycle, and my own cycle. Can we just rewind really briefly to time? What should, besides the obvious, where everything goes in double speed, essentially, in double elixir time, how should your play style change in the last minute of a match and into overtime versus the first 2 minutes? Oftentimes I find myself kind of doing more exploratory moves in the first 2 minutes, kind of playing things cautiously, and then I tend to get more aggressive. Is that a good move, or maybe should I not be doing that?
That's typically how you should be playing.
Okay.
It really does depend on your deck though, and your playstyle. If you're playing Balloon Giant or something, then most likely you're not playing exploratory at all. You're just going to go kill him and then defend. But that's the exception. Sure. Normally, that's the way you want to play. Time is always time is the limiting factor in your game, and you have to remind yourself of that. A lot of times, when I watch players, they don't keep the time factor in check, and then they won't make moves that they need to in order to win a game because they can't visualize their win condition. They get too caught up within the game itself.
And one last question about time. How should I change my play style in terms of being more defensive, more offensive, based on where I am in the match? Meaning, let's say my opponent has one of my towers down to 1,000 HP, and I have barely any damage off my opponent's towers. Should I play more aggressive there, or should I just stick to my game plan? That's something that I struggle with. Time's ticking off the clock, and I'm like, oh crap! If things keep going the way they do, I'm gonna lose.
Yeah. I think what usually happens there is that people you'll feel the heat then, right?
Yeah.
Your tower's going down. Something has to change.
Yeah.
Most people will just do stuff like lane switch. What we can get from that is that, if you're keeping track of the time and you know that what you're doing isn't working, then either switch or understanding that you have to speed up the game in some way in order to get back into it is needed. I'm not sure if I explained that well. If I understand that there's 30 seconds left and that his tower has 600 damage left, I need to be able to bring this tower down to this amount of HP within this amount of time in order to keep the game going to the next phase. If I don't meet these conditions, then I lose. If I meet it, then the game keeps going on. And this is how comebacks are made.
Yeah, so you're like constantly reevaluating kind of the board, basically.
Yeah. It is very much like a game like chess. Like,
yeah.
Every piece can be traded, and it depends on how well you play your cards to see how well you trade.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. So, yeah, what if you're to come from behind? Are there any tips? Like I said, I mean, should I be a little bit more aggressive, like even in one individual play, or should you kind of stick to your game plan?
For you,
I know it depends on the
like
deck. It depends, obviously, you know.
It depends on the deck, yes, but the deck is definitely not the biggest factor. It's the player. I do think that when you come back, or you have the ability to come back a lot, you have a really good grasp of the game, because you know the flow of the game, you know the thought process of their opponent, you know what they're thinking, you know what you're thinking, you know what you're visualizing, like how your win looks like, how their win looks like, and then you're trying your best to make your win come true.
Yeah, and those are the last two. Those are the last two of your 5 most important factors in the game. Basically, visualizing your win and visualizing your opponent's win, making yours happen and stopping your opponent's from happening.
Yeah, like I had a game where I was down a tower, like almost right at the bat, right against like a Lava Hound graveyard deck or something. Knowing how they want to win, and knowing how I want to win, I was playing Minor Poison. I Minor Poisoned his right tower, trying to get it down before time limit, right? And I know that his play is to drop Lava Hounds in the middle. So knowing that, I can act in a series of orders, like make just decisions so that I don't lose right away, so that the game keeps going on. You know, and this like translates to other play. Like, okay, I have a tower down and I'm playing against RG. What am I doing? As a player, most likely if I have an Inferno Tower, I'm holding Inferno Tower in the middle and I'm anticipating his moves to stop him from making the game-winning moves.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So you're really, you know, you're thinking of 5 things in the game. So you're thinking of time, you're thinking of your cycle, you're trying to ascertain what the opponent's cycle is, and then you're visualizing your win condition, and at the same time, you're visualizing your opponent's win condition. So that's a lot to be thinking about. Do you prioritize any of those things, or is there a way to get a handle on all 5 of those factors without letting one go?
No. I think they're all equally important.
Okay. Time is easy, because time's just, you know, right there on the screen, so that's easy. Your cycle, you should know, so that kind of takes out another one, and then there's really 3 things in your win condition you should know too. So really, it's about, if you know your own deck, it sounds like it's really your first focus in a match, because you know how much time is left, you know your deck, you know your cycle, you know your win condition. It sounds like you should be putting most of your mental energy into the opponent.
Yeah, that's why your eyes should always be on your opponent. Your brain should always be tracking what they're doing.
Okay.
Tracking like Elixir, tracking all that stuff will come in time. If you watch the replays, if you just, you know, do basic math. In the beginning, I think the first minute you can track almost the Elixir to the T. If you really push yourself.
Yeah.
And then later on, you don't have to worry about that. But
well, I know we're running a little long here, but I have to ask: do you have any tips to get better at accounting your opponent's elixir?
The only economy in the game is elixir.
Yeah.
Think of it as your macro. Macro is basically like your overall game plan, your the way you handle your economy. If under perfect conditions, both players are playing their economy at 10 elixir, they're not allowing themselves to overflow. So in the beginning of the game, I like to always have an opening move. I don't like to sit there and wait and leak elixir. Okay. So as soon as I play something, like say I play a Hog Rider, right? My elixir goes from 10 to 6. I'll start tracking like what he does from there on. If he waits too long to play an elixir, that means I get a +1 or something. If he responds to my Hog Rider with, say, Mega Minion, then I can track that he's now at 7. And then he attacks me with his Hog Rider. So then, like, if he's at 7, he plays an extra Hog Rider. He's now at 3. I just played Hog Rider, so I'm at 6. Now I defend, and then I just keep making these really small interactions in my head, and then you can kind of figure out like where you are, if you're ahead or you're behind.
Okay, so you're just basically concentrating on every single move, making sure you account for it. What if
Yes.
you gain like a really big elixir advantage, but you just don't have your win condition or whatever card you need to punish your opponent? Like, for example, I mean, this might not be a perfect example, but sometimes I struggle with, let's say I have a hog deck and my opponent plays a golem behind their tower, and the right move would always be to push the opposite lane, but I don't have the hog up for 3 cards in my cycle. Do you cycle to the hog really quick and leave yourself very vulnerable on the other side? Or do you play just super defensively and hope for the best?
So I know this position. Like, if you have one win condition, say like a Hog Rider deck, and your hand looks something like Tombstone, Zap, Fireball, Mega Minion, right? And then you play Golem at the tower.
Yep.
And you have an elixir lead, you have a damage lead, most likely because you just pushed with Hog Rider in the beginning.
Yes.
You have to keep in mind that, like, if he's doing these big moves and he's putting himself into more of a hole, you just want to maintain your lead. Okay. You don't want to overextend. So cards where you can, like, bank elixir, like a Tombstone you would want to play. Okay. It's okay to drop cards in order to get to a good part of your cycle, so long as you're not just throwing them away.
Okay.
Yeah, like in that position, I would have played Tombstone, and then just play like a Mega Minion, and then I'm already 2 cards away from my Hog Rider, and then I just do another push.
Okay.
Some players would Fireball in order to get rid of their Fireball, and then put weapons if they needed it. Or there are always safe plays within your hand. You just have to find out which plays you can make without having detriment to yourself.
Okay, yeah, that makes perfect sense. So the last thing I just wanted to ask you about before I let you go is you're a huge advocate of really having a deliberate reason and explanation for every single play of the entire match. Now that's easier said than done, but can you explain what that means and how you can get a better handle on having a reason behind every single play that you make?
Yes. So because this game is a 1v1 game, all resources are equal. All resources are distributed. What I mean by that is when the game starts, everybody gets a king tower, everybody gets 2 crown towers, everybody has time. The difference is your cards and yourself. And their cards and your opponent, right? Yeah. The way you can think about it is that all resources, like everything in the game is a resource. Your elixir, your crown tower health, your king tower health, all that stuff. If you give up stuff for free, then you have to have a reason for that. If you make a decision, it's going to directly impact the board. You have to have a decision for that. You have to have a reasoning for that. And it at the end of the day, it'll help you get better as a player if you stop making these decisions where you go back and say, I don't know what I'm doing here.
Okay, so basically, I understand all the fixed resources that we all share. So what you're saying is get to know a deck so that every single decision that you make is basically, what you're doing for, like, so what if you're at full elixir and you have no play to make and you don't have any obvious play? What do you do in situations like that, kind of?
I would play out the match. I would just do whatever and then go back and figure out what I could have done better. Okay, cool. Yep.
So that comes back into the importance of watching your replays.
Yeah, it's just like this isn't one thing that you can, like, this whole video isn't one thing that you can latch on and get better. It's a combination of things. When this all comes together, like for a top player, you see it all come together.
Mm-hmm.
They don't. Here, wait, sorry. Top players like don't look at their board and like wonder how their unit interacts. Almost every single time the interactions are memorized. They're like trading pieces on the board, knowing what's going to happen, knowing whether they get advantages or whether they get like, losses or something. Everything is being tracked. The game time, the elixir, the game tempo. It looks clean, and that's how you want to eventually like have your play up to. You want to have clean play. You want to have consistent play. That's what it always comes back to.
Yeah.
Top players are always consistent.
Yeah. You're totally right, man. It's just like oftentimes, I don't know about you, but when I watch like a really good player, like yourself, it seems like, I mean, I'm sure people out there can relate to it, but it seems like I do all that stuff, you know, why can't I be that good, you know? And I think a lot of it comes down to what you just said, like consistency. They do all that stuff every single time, you know? So
every single time.
Yeah. So
it's never like you do not just like focus on making flashy plays every game. That's not going to get you anywhere. The best players historically in almost every single game have never been the really flashy, like, look at me kind of player. Mm-hmm. It's always been the player who's done one thing 1,000 times, and then they move on, do another thing 1,000 times, and they never mess up the fundamentals. Everything that I'm talking about here goes back to the fundamentals. You don't know it yet, but these are the fundamentals of Clash Royale. It's like things like counting elixir, your opponent's cycle, your cycle, time, win conditions, kill conditions, like stuff like that. And if you don't focus on that, then what you're doing is you're playing blindly. You're just kind of grasping in the dark.
Yeah. And
then when you hit something, you don't know what to do against it anymore. So you just stagnate. You don't improve. You don't move beyond that wall.
Yeah. Yeah.
So figure out like what that wall is for you, and then you want to try and break it down, you know, using just like your own tools. If you let shit like your mindset or your delusion that you're like way better than you really are to get in your way, you're never going to get anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, dude, very good advice. I'll tell you what, I'm going to walk away from this conversation and hopefully, you know, I'm probably just going to lose miserably, but what I think I'm going to do is absolutely dominate because I'm going to try to pay, like you said, I'm going to try to pay more attention to what my opponent's trying to do and less attention to what I'm going to try to do. I think, like, for me at least, you know, I'm sure everybody who's listened to this conversation are going to come out with their own takeaway. But for me, it's like devoting more of my mental energy into my opponent and less towards me, if that makes sense.
Yeah. What people don't see about really strong players is how many times they lost to get up there.
Yeah.
You guys don't see that. Know that it happens, and like they probably lost way more until they started winning.
Yeah, definitely great advice, man. And honestly, this whole conversation has been awesome, man. I just wanted to thank you again so much for coming on, EsoPa. Can you tell people about when you stream and how to get in touch with you?
Yeah, I stream on Twitch Sundays to Thursdays from 8 p.m. Eastern to, I don't know, like 1 in the morning. Mm-hmm. If you want to get in touch with me, my email is esopastream@gmail.com. My Twitter is twitter.com/esostream. And I think that's good.
Cool.
Thank you for having me on, Kosh.
Dude.
Ash.
Yeah, no problem, man. Yeah, I'll you know, and guys listening in, I'll include all the links. And honest to God, like, I'm not just saying this because you're on the channel, but I think that you are, and a lot of people, anybody who's watched your streams would certainly agree that you're definitely one of the best streamers to watch, if not the best. In terms of like being able to really pick up a lot of strategy tips. Like, some streamers out there are super entertaining, and it's not that you're not entertaining, but I think that, you know, from someone who's tuned in, you know, less often than I'd like to, but, you know, at least half a dozen times, every time I watch you, I'm like, wow, I'm picking up something new. So you guys should definitely check out EsoPa. And man, I'd love to have you on again, man. It's been a great time talking to you.
Yeah, it's been great. Thank you for having me on.
No problem. Thanks for sharing all your advice, man. So take care, man, and have a happy holidays.
Yep. Have a happy holiday.
Thanks. And there you have it, guys. I hope you enjoyed that interview with EsoPa. He was certainly a wealth of knowledge. Like I said in the beginning, I hope you walked away a little bit better a player than when you entered this video. So guys, thanks so much for watching all the way till the end. I really appreciate it. And as always, take care, guys.